Welcome to the New Ventures podcast. Our guest for today is Toby Hammond, the managing director of Futurepump. Futurepump provides solar irrigation pumps to 1 acre farmers. There are about 500 million farmers with 1 acre holdings across Asia and Africa, and Futurepump helps them maintain yields and decrease costs, even as climate changes creates uncertainties in their livelihoods. Toby founded Futurepump in 2013. He has been working in various sustainability projects since he graduated from Manchester University in 2000. But I guess his interest in Africa started when in 2002, he cycled all the way from London to Johannesburg. And for the 6 years, he also ran a company which held nightclub events for recent graduates of various UK universities working in London, very aptly called the Nostalgia Club. Toby, very honestly, given these 12 months, the very word nightclub makes me feel very nostalgic.
Oh, yes, that's
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much, Toby, for coming to our podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Toby, let's start at the beginning. You used the designs developed by Gert Han Boom, a Dutch inventor who was working in Practicare Foundation. And that's probably the type of time I met your colleagues in Nairobi. Tell us a little bit about how you developed a business out of a product.
Yeah, it was a funny story, really. I had a chance YouTube encounter, you could call it, with Gert Han Boom, who's this Dutch inventor, amazing guy, and he'd uploaded a video of his prototype onto YouTube, which I was rather captivated by when I stumbled upon it. So, to cut a long story short, we got in touch and realized that there was a certain complementarity to his skills and mine and some of the other people that were in my team, and we decided to take to market this this prototype solar pump, as it was then. And shortly after that, got in touch with an amazing Indian entrepreneur who helped us to set up the manufacturing. So I think there's been quite a few really lucky encounters and chances along the way that has made it possible to bring this product to market.
Oh, great. As I say here in some parts of the world, stars align when great people come together. But you had a prototype, and to make it a business, tell us a little bit about the testing, finding the early adopter customers, the markets that where you'd scale in the beginning. If you can tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So we started off around about 2013, but we spent the first 3 years really doing field testing. And we did that predominantly in Western Kenya, and set up a kind of a field testing center in the end, where we could take our pump designs, our new pump prototypes, and get them used by real farmers, and frequently get them broken by real farmers as well, because we were very keen to make it a very robust product, and also a product that really met the needs of these 1 acre farmers that you mentioned earlier. And really the only way to do that is to get stuck in with those customers and really understand their needs and the problems that they have, and what the product should look like to solve those. And sitting in a workshop or a lab designing a product, you're not going to get that right the first time. You've got to get that sort of feedback loop working from taking your products, testing them out with customers, getting their feedback, and then going back to the drawing board. And so we did an awful lot of that in the first 3 years. And actually, we thought at some point we'd be finished. It seems now we're never going to be finished. That it's a constantly iterating sort of feedback loop, where we're always learning from our product, from our customers, and they're very generous with their feedback, and when we bring new products or new ideas to them as well. And I think that is probably at the heart of what we've managed to achieve so far.
Great. So, and that's the story that fascinates me, and I want to understand a little bit about it. A lot of us who work in these fields feel that, these countries and regions differ so much from each other, that, Western Kenya, where you started, itself differs from central Kenya, and it differs from other parts of Africa. But you have a product now, which you started 3 years back, which was field tested, hammered and broken down by farmers in Western Kenya, and today works in 17 countries, right? Both East and West Africa, some parts of Asia as well. How does a product like this scale across these very different geographies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think what we managed to do, looking back, was come up with something that solved that was about right and solved the problem for a certain type of smallholder vegetable farmer that we originally found in West Africa, in West Kenya, and there are similar-ish customers and farmers throughout Africa and to some extent Asia. But there is no one-size-fits-all solution as well. Within even a village, you've got different types of farms, different crops, different attitudes to irrigation, for example. So we can't serve everybody. And indeed, we are only scratching the surface so far. And as you're suggesting there, we do see quite big differences across countries, across regions. So, for example, in West Africa, the irrigation practices are different. In Asia, the farms tend to be a bit larger, and the crops are different, and so that means different requirements. And as we've grown, we've brought to market more product variants that address those different niches. And again, that's an ongoing process as well.
Great. So, obviously bringing product variants helps you cater to different market segments, but you're also driving down costs, quite dramatically, right? In 2018, when I met your colleagues in Nairobi, the product was probably priced at $750. Today, what I hear, it's priced at much less. If you have different variants, how do you bring down costs?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the answer to that question entirely. We're still trying to figure that out. We are obviously looking to always drive down the cost of our product, because I mean, it pretty much goes without saying that our customers, being low-income smallholder farmers, have not got a lot of money, a lot of disposable income, and so the price point is all important. We've introduced a kind of entry-level product, which is a bit smaller than the product we were selling at, and that's one way we've managed to drive down the cost. And then there are also opportunities for larger products where the farmer has succeeded in growing their business and is actually looking to scale up their farm and their irrigated land. But I think one other thing we've learned is that it's not just about the build cost of the product. Actually, a far larger part of the cost that the farmer pays, the retail price, is the distribution price. And we are distributing to farmers in very remote locations, and we do that through a network of distribution partners in these 17 or 20 countries where we're actually working now. And our distributors face a lot of challenges in importing those goods and getting them to the farmers and making those sales. So we're also redoubling our focus on how we can better support those distributors, and we'd like them to be selling more units at a lower margin rather than fewer units at a higher margin. But that's also a work in progress there to try and drive down that end user cost.
Right. So it's not just about manufacturing; it's the total cost of ownership. It includes, the cost of bringing the product to the farmer, and which is fascinating, because I know that in Kenya your partner is one of the largest sort of pump companies there, Davis and Shirtliff. Dates back to Kenya's pre-independence days.
That's right. Yeah.
But I also know that in other parts of Africa, your partners are much smaller organizations, right? So how do they get to know about you, and how do you get to know about them?
Well, we come across them in all kinds of different ways, actually. That they may have seen us at a trade show, which we go to, you know, with a demonstration unit of our product. They may have found us online or seen a farmer using it elsewhere and thought, well, that would suit farmers in my country. We also do go looking for them as well, trying to find the most suitable partners for a given country, and there's no sort of, there are certain parameters that we want to see in a distributor, but we do have quite a diverse bunch of distribution partners, who some of whom are retailing pumps, as you mentioned, like our partners Davis and Shirtliff in Kenya, and others are more solar orientated or solar finance companies even. So in Uganda, we work with a company called Solar Now, which is essentially a solar financing company, and they're able to introduce a payment plan offer to their customers, which spreads the cost of acquiring the pump over 12 or 18 months. And obviously that's a very attractive thing for many farmers.
Great. And you touched upon something that I'm very curious to know about, because in the whole of Africa, and particularly in East Africa, solar products have been sold on credit. So do you have to sell your product in credit, in which case are your partners organizations like Solar Now, or do you have banks as partners as well?
We don't have to sell our product on credit, but probably around half of our sales have been put out on some form of payment plan or credit through our partners. We even have some technology on the pump which enables a kind of remote monitoring system that is used by solar lighting systems, so-called PayGo lighting or PayGo solar model. But actually, there are times when I wonder, well, is actually that just a sticking plaster for the fact that the product is too expensive? And should we as a manufacturer really focus on trying to find a better product market fit by making the product cheaper in the first place, so that it is affordable on a cash basis, or at least a sort of friends and family loans basis to farmers? We have worked with banks and MFIs, and in some circumstances that can be very good, but in others it can simply add cost and complexity to an already fairly tricky business model, distribution model.
Right. And so then you go back to the first thing that you discussed, manufacturing the product and getting the product distributed at ever decreasing costs, right?
That's what we're trying to do. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And the other element of cost and use to come to for farmers is, of course, the servicing issue, right? There are many manifestations about this, but in large parts of Africa, less densely populated areas, just getting a service person to a farmer's places could be incredibly expensive, very difficult, and of course reduces the farmer's interest in the product. Obviously, you're thinking very hard about it, and maybe if you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, the after sales service is all important, and unfortunately there's a great many well-meaning devices or farm technologies or other things which lie disused, even pumps as well, for want of a 10-cent spare part that just isn't in the right place. So Absolutely. we really didn't want to repeat that mistake, but this is a challenging problem. The logistics of getting spare parts or service technicians to places that may be 50 kilometers off the nearest tarmac road in some cases. So I think we think about this in a number of levels. The first one is, let's try really hard to design a product that's super robust and doesn't break in the first place. And our field testing has helped us, as I mentioned earlier, sort of towards that goal. And we offer a 5-year warranty. I believe we're the only solar pump company that does that on our pump because we're so confident in its robustness and durability. It's quite happy being pumped dry or pumping sandy water and all that kind of thing, which not all pumps can cope with. I think the next level is, well, if it does need servicing, and at some point it's going to, because it has moving parts, of course, and gets quite a lot of abuse on farms. When it does need servicing, let's empower the farmer to do that themselves. Let's make the design really, really simple and intuitive. Let's put the spare parts that they're likely to need, and even the tools that they'll need to do that, in the box, in every box. And so that's what we do. We have a spare parts and toolkit that goes in every box, along with pictorial diagrams of, you know, how to change such and such a seal or something like that. And we have YouTube videos and other tools for those that have got smartphone access to guide them through that. If that doesn't work, then we're training our distributors in each country, and we do in-person training and equip them with further spare parts. And if that doesn't work, we still backstop everything globally. Even if we have to FedEx something from India, we will do that, to make sure that we honor this 5-year warranty and that we keep these pumps running so they can deliver the impact that we intend them to, and that our farmers are investing in.
Exactly. And I have heard, just wondering if this is really true, that when you have employee and partner meets, you apparently have a competition where people would have to disassemble and assemble a pump in less than 4 minutes. Do people actually win that competition?
That's right. Yeah, we have in normal times, outside of pandemics, we have distributor meetups that we call jamborees, and one of the features of that is a sort of competitive tear down and rebuild of the pump, which is timed in different groups. And the current world record is just under 4 minutes for taking apart every part and then reassembling them. A bit like sort of a Formula One pit stop, with everyone there with the tools. I mean, that is pretty impressive. Those guys knew what they were doing to achieve that. But that hopefully illustrates that it is a very simple machine. You know, it's not full of electronics or very difficult things. It's deliberately basic, and that's what we think is needed for this application.
Fantastic. And actually, you know, the thing that you brought up about the Jamboree just makes me ask the next question, which is about your culture. And a UK entrepreneur partnering with somebody, a Dutch inventor who was probably at that time in East Africa, meets an Indian entrepreneur. You know, how do you manage your organization culture? I mean, if the Netflix CEO wrote this book called No Rules, right? And if you had to write a book, what do you write?
Netflix culture is very impressive. I've seen some of that stuff. Yeah, I think we don't have a big sort of PowerPoint about our or book about our culture, but I think from the start it's always been based on high levels of trust and giving people responsibility and expecting them to behave responsibly. My colleagues, I mean, and treating them, like adults, really. We've found that you can't have a kind of command and control style of management when you're working across multiple countries and time zones and cultures. You have to understand different perspectives. And you have to empower people to make their own decisions and trust them to do that. Understand that nothing's ever going to be perfect, and I think we're really lucky with Futurepump in that we've just got some fantastic people who've joined us who share our mission, and we are a company, a for-profit company, but we're all motivated by the social and environmental impact of what we do, and that means that everyone hopefully finds their work meaningful, or in some cases it perhaps doesn't even feel like work, because it's it's things they want to be doing. I think one of the things that really started the whole ball rolling was when I mentioned that YouTube encounter with the with the inventor Gertian Bomm. He when I sent him an email saying, "Hey, I saw your YouTube video. It looks really interesting. Maybe I could help you to bring it to market." He emailed me by return back the blueprints and designs of his solar pump that he'd been working on for many years as an attachment, without having even spoken to me at that point.
Yeah.
and
trust.
no non-disclosure agreement, no sort of none of that stuff. He just wants to see it out there doing good, and he wants to see his technologies making impact. And I just thought, well, isn't that fantastic? This is the kind of person I want to do business with. And particularly I'd come out of an experience which was the opposite, which was all another startup with lawyers and venture capital and a lot of tricky business and all that kind of stuff. And I just found that so refreshing to find someone who who just wanted to crack on, really. And let's not worry too much about 200-page legal contracts and then non-disclosure agreements. Let's just get to work.
Exactly. So I think the trust was born on that day. And how did you meet your Indian entrepreneur to set up the manufacturing base here?
Yeah, what we did there was I posted an advert looking for a procurement agent or help with sourcing in India and China, actually, at the same time. I think I put it on a website. It may have been freelancer.com or one of those kind of websites where you can find people with different skills. And I had a bunch of replies from different people across India and China. But the reply from Jitubai, our co-founder, what just stood out because he was so passionate about the potential of what was being described, and so careful to set out all the options in a very sort of selfless and again, in a way, a really human way, and not a kind of, it doesn't come across so commercial. It comes across as someone who really cares about their work. And again, it just jumped out as this is the person we need to work with. So I was on a plane out to Mumbai a short while later and had a fantastic time meeting him and his wife, who is also his business partner. It really just started from there with initially a very small little workshop factory on the second floor of another building in Pune, and then we later moved to Rajkot in Gujarat, and then this last year, we've moved into a new purpose-built factory there, all under his stewardship and leadership. There, doing the whole, our Futurepump India division, which is tasked with all the market manufacturing and logistics, and this is a huge part of the business that they all manage and do so very well.
Yeah, but this is fascinating. I mean, I just heard you say the co-founder, and so the co-founder of the company was somebody whom you had never met, different culture, and you just sort of bumped into him on freelancer.com, but it's the vibes and the culture just transmitted across the internet waves. Well, like that, right?
It probably wasn't until we met in person, to be fair. And we didn't originally say, "Oh, we're looking for a co-founder." It actually took us some while before we realized, well, actually, he is a co-founder, isn't he? He was there almost at the start, and has realized, one of the most important parts of the business, which is the production and to some extent the design and production of our pumps. And so he is a co-founder. In fact, he's such a modest man that he took some persuasion to take the name, the title of co-founder originally. I think we may have agreed on co-founding director or something like that, but there you are. He's another fantastic person that we're very lucky to have as part of the foundations of the business.
Exactly. People talk of often growing into one's role, right? And this is what I'm hearing you describe it as people grew into the role of co-founder, actually, starting from sort of almost helping each other.
Yeah, that's right. And we're all, I think we're all growing all the time, aren't we? I mean, if
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
successful, I didn't really know what I was doing when we were starting this. I didn't understand the market. I didn't understand the engineering or the challenges. And all of us as individuals have grown and learned so much along this journey. And we have other members of staff who joined us straight out of university, who are now absolutely crucial parts of the team as well, because of the amount that they've grown with the business. That's a wonderful thing to see and to be part of, actually, that
Absolutely.
process.
Absolutely. Are there things in your culture that, or as a management process, you consciously don't do? I mean, things that, in a large company or in a place like with lawyers and 200-page NDAs where people do, which you consciously stay away from?
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier on our style of management, certainly mine anyway, is not it is not sort of command and controlled. So we don't track people's leave. We don't expect people to be always at their desk from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for those that work at desks. We trust people, that we understand that everyone has to balance family commitments, or particularly this last year, everything else going on. So yeah, I think I like to think that as I said earlier, that those people that are working for Futurepump are doing so because they find it fulfilling, and that we should treat them as we might treat friends and family. Whether that culture scales to a large company, I think that's why the Netflix thing is so interesting. I mean, it's quite easy to be collegiate and chummy when there's only a handful of you, but if you become a company the size of someone like Netflix, then I imagine scaling that culture up and not losing it is a lot harder. I think the people at Netflix said they had to sort of fight against investors who said, well, come on, guys, it's time to grow up now. You're a big company. You need all these policies and procedures. And they said, actually, no, we don't. That's going to kill the soul of the business if we put in all this red tape and all this hierarchy. And they've managed to preserve it. Suddenly I'm talking more about Netflix. But anyway, it's very interesting to see that it perhaps is possible to preserve that sort of startup culture as you grow as a company.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about your last crowdfunding project in which you have raised $1 million. Obviously, what surprised me about that is that investors are pouring in millions of dollars into the pay-as-you-go market, solar home system, mini grids in Africa. And you also have your own pay-as-you-go product. You are sort of there in the UK, which is one of the hubs of investing in this area. At the same time, what surprised me is when I read that you had many conversations with institutional investors, and many of them just ended abruptly. And then you started thinking about crowdfunding. What is the discrepancy, or what is how should I say, the point of disconnect between institutional investors and entrepreneurs?
Well, I think I can only speak from my own experience, and I'll have to generalize a bit. There are obviously some great impact investors out there who've supported our sort of off-grid solar sector hugely. My own experience is a little coloured by the previous startup where I was burnt badly by some venture capital investors. And so I suppose we went into Futurepump at the start with a slightly different mindset, which is, well, let's let's try and get the fundamental building blocks of the business in place before we talk too seriously to to equity investors. And we were fortunate to get some fairly significant grant money because of the environmental impact, social impact that we deliver. We got some grant money from people like USAID to help us on our way. And over the years, we've spoken and done, entered due diligence actually with many of, well, not many, quite a few of the big names of the kind of impact investing world who are interested in off-grid solar. But it could be that I'm just not very good at raising money that way. but we've always found them to be very slow, to require huge amounts of audited this and forecasts of that and models of that, which are not part of the the core day-to-day challenges of running the business. It can be, in other words, a huge distraction from what you're trying to achieve, raising money that way. And yeah, in several cases we were talking and actually did huge amounts of work at the behest of these investors, only to, after 6 or even 12 months, have an email from them saying, sorry guys, we've changed our investment criteria or something, you're no longer a fit. So the crowdfunding thing is just really appealing to us because it can be quite a fast way of raising money. And again, I think going back to our culture, it's actually a really good fit for Futurepump, because you're getting a relatively small amount of money from a large number of people who back your mission and who like what you're doing on some level, hopefully. So in our case, we raised $1 million from about 1,200 people, and people putting in as little as $15, £10 to buy a few shares in the company, and those people are now almost an army of advocates for our mission. They've been making connections and introductions to us. I know someone who might be interested in being your distributor in such and such a country, and so on. So I feel like actually the equity crowdfunding kind of revolution for startups, which is being in the UK led by the likes of Crowdcube, which is the platform where we raised money. I just think it's a really, really positive development for particularly meaningful startups that are doing something that is disruptive or socially, environmentally positive, because there is a huge appetite out there, and a huge amounts of money as well that's sitting around, that people, everyday people, are really delighted to put behind a business that they believe in. And isn't that a wonderful way of raising money, rather than striking backroom deals with kind of money bandits and lawyers, which is often what it ends up being with the venture funds,
Right. It is wonderful, but obviously there are lots of details around it. It might be useful to just get into a few of them. What was obviously most entrepreneurs are like what you were doing, right? Writing proposals, discussing with investors and so on and so forth. But what was the sort of, one moment when you said, boop, let's do crowdfunding? Was there some success that you heard from some entrepreneurs? Was there a kind of, what was the momentum behind the crowdfunding decision?
Well, it was the sort of start of the pandemic. I guess it was around this time last year, actually, in the UK, when the pandemic was hitting, and a lot of funds were kind of stopping investing and things like that. And we had looked at crowdfunding previously, and at that point, the sort of legalities of raising, of selling shares that way were still a bit shaky. And I just realized that this was now an increasingly established route. And I was amazed to see that there were some financial technology companies that had raised very large sums on this Crowdcube platform. There's another beer company called Brewdog here in the UK, which had raised extraordinary sums from their beer drinking customers, yeah, it just seemed like that its time had come, and that it was a great fit for us. So yeah, I went for a walk with my British co-founder Quentin. My brain always seems to work better when walking than sitting down, and we just talked it through and decided that
it's a British way, walking.
It's a what? Sorry.
It's the British way.
British way, is it? All right, yeah, yeah. But yeah, we went for a walk, socially distanced, of course, and we just thought that actually this was the time was right to give this a whirl. And I soon found that a friend of mine from years back had actually raised, unbeknownst to me, raised some money on this platform already. So he was helpful in giving us some steers and tips, and yeah, we sort of began this process of preparing the pitch on the crowdfunding platform, and doing the video and things like that. And it's quite a lot of work, but it felt much more like we were in the driving seat, doing it that way than being always on the back foot and feeling less in control, I suppose, when talking to large venture investors.
Exactly, but this a lot of work is it's wonderful, obviously, to raise reasonable sums of money from a large pool of investors. But there is a lot of work, right? The communication in particular becomes very, very critical. And one of the problems with old crowdfunding was that companies would really have to do all the hard work of the communication themselves. Has that changed with platforms like the one you did?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly had a whole load of very good and quite tricky questions posed during the pitch process when we were live by prospective investors, which was a lot of work to and fro, that kind of communication. But those who did go ahead and invest are all administrated through a nominee structure by Crowdcube, by the platform, and that basically means that there is one point of contact that represents all those 1,200 investors. So there's no sort of AGM kind of thing where there's 1,200 people who've got £10 worth of shares come along.
Right.
So administratively, for us, we haven't really done it yet because we only just raised it, but it seems like it's pretty reasonable. We still want to communicate with those investors because, as I mentioned earlier, there are some great people with some great skills amongst them. But in terms of the requirements to communicate, I think we're just committed to a quarterly update, on how the business is going with some key numbers, and which will be sent, and that's the sort of thing we do anyway. So that we have no problem with that at all.
Great. So the interesting thing that I wanted to understand is that these 1,200 people, were they people who were earlier known to you, some of your friends, customers, partners, or they were all sort of already on the Crowdcube database?
Yeah, so we were really interested to find that out as well. I think when I got into it, I thought, well, if you do the right pitch on Crowdcube, then there are all these people there that will just invest that you've never heard of. And what we found was that by launching with the right momentum, and that did mean involving some existing contacts that we had, then you kind of get off to a good start, and then the kind of anonymous crowd that you've never heard of before, then pick it up and carry it a lot further as the progress bar, advances, and so there is a kind of a lot of upfront work in sort of getting that momentum and going off with a bang, and perhaps doing some media work, lining up a few people who are interested to invest on day one, and things like that. But we ended up with investors from over 60 countries around the world, including all the countries where we work. And those investors include even some of our end user farmers. They include our distribution partners. They include people that work for NGOs that have heard about our work. We just think that is really democratizing and really inclusive to get all these diverse people with their stake in what we're doing. And we were just so delighted to see these sums coming in from all over the world. Yeah.
Right. So these end user farmers, I mean, this is obviously so fascinating. End user farmers in Kenya or Tanzania, the NGO partners in these countries, obviously I would assume they did not know about Crowdcube, right? You got them to the platform.
That's right. Yes. So we did that work in explaining what we were trying to do, and I'm not saying that the bulk of our money came from 1 acre smallholder farmers in rural Kenya. But there are those who like our product enough that they wanted to be a part of the journey and to have a piece of it, really. And I think it's kind of an emotional decision as much as a rational one, isn't it? Something like this. You feel that your heart feels that you want to be involved on some level with this company or this opportunity, and then your head perhaps asks a few more sensible questions about sales figures and turnover. Yeah, so we brought some of those people to the table. We had introduced them to the Crowdcube platform and how that works, but then there was actually a huge number of people who are already on the Crowdcube kind of database who then saw our pitch and joined in as well.
Right. So it seems like almost the way you're describing it, that you build a initial momentum of, let's say, early adopters, people who know you, people who believe in the vision, and that sort of swells into a larger crowd. That's the way it probably played off in your case.
Yeah, and I think going back to this sort of emotional decision making, no one wants to invest in a proposition that is at 1% of its target on the progress bar. You have these progress bars. You want to invest in something that already looks like a success. The idea is to make sure it goes off with the bang, that lots of people are investing on the first day, and we got lucky with some media coverage, which also helps there. And then it sort of gathers pace, this momentum of its own. And we actually, we hit we had a funding target of £300,000, which we hit in the first few days. And then we actually closed early. We stopped it at a £750,000, which is $1 million, after about 2 weeks, because that was all we wanted to raise.
Great. I mean, you don't have, I like the way you're saying it. You don't have to raise large capital just because, that's the way to go, but you raise the amount of capital that you need, and hopefully you go back to the same people and ask them for incremental money. And that goes on for a long time.
Yeah, and there are businesses that have gone back 3 or 4 times as their business, as it's progressed. And, you end up with some very loyal, if the business is going well, of course, you end up with some very loyal investors who will, double down and invest again or tell their friends and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's a great model for raising capital, personally. Right.
And it's completely different from the way, let's say, just going back to the pay-as-you-go companies, or, for that matter, the conventional VC-funded companies, which is you raise a 50 million in one shot, right?
Yeah.
And then sort of try and grow rapidly to raise a 70 million later. In your case, you are just doing it the other way around,
I think, yeah, and I'm not saying crowdfunding is for everyone. I mean, they depending on the scale, there was obviously a point where you might want to raise a larger lump in one shot, as you were describing. But I think that also reflects what kind of business you are. I mean, we have grown relatively steadily. We're trying to get fundamentals right. We're not making promises and projections that we can't keep. The sort of more Silicon Valley model of fundraising is, you raise a ton of money when you've only got a PowerPoint deck. You hire a load of smart people, you run as fast as you can, and hope you don't run out of money, and hope you capture a market and become worth a lot of money very quickly. And that's the sort of higher octane way of doing it, which I think personally is not very well suited to a business like ours that is trying to solve some pretty difficult problems with some pretty low income consumers in places like Africa. It's not an obvious .com unicorn sort of investment proposition. It's it's something a bit more substantial and difficult, perhaps.
Right. I think the point really is that in a traditional Silicon Valley type of investing scenario, you'd raise a lot of money, you'd burn it, but you, as you said, you'll try and grow to a point where you become you at least capture a certain market share. But in your case, perhaps the philosophy is to grow slowly. Just make sure that you are not burning money and prove the next point and the next point, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we are still run a pretty lean operation. We are quite a small team. We're about 35 globally, 7 in the UK, the rest are mostly in India. So yeah, we're sort of doing things in our own way. And I mean, there are other companies in our sector who are following more of a sort of venture funding route and are raising quite spectacular amounts of money and hiring lots of smart people and burning their money faster. And I'm not saying that is the wrong way to do it. It may well work out well, but for us it wasn't the right way.
Right.
We wanted to.
We will know in a few years from now. The one thing that I wanted to ask is that the hard work that you did in the beginning. One of the things that always stuns me is that your communication. Right from 14 or 15. The blogs, for example, on your website. Every month, regularly too. I've actually counted. So obviously there is a. It seems to me that in your sort of planning process, there is a strong accent in communication. Is that, or am I just imagining too much?
No, you're quite right, and a lot of the credit for that goes to my colleague Helen, who you met the other day, I think, Sanjoy. I mean, she has been with us for quite a few years, since really quite almost the start, and she's always been very good at writing those blogs, at communicating to our customers and to our distributors. And because of the globalized nature of our business and how we work in different cultures, different languages, different time zones, we have to kind of really dial up the communication effort, I think, to try and overcome the barriers that are there. Yeah, I think that's served us well. She sometimes tells me, you can't over communicate. You don't be shy about posting this on LinkedIn or something like that. People like to hear what we're doing, and she's right. We've come a long way thanks to our outreach online.
Right, fantastic. And then, so what's the next goal? With the $750,000, $1 million, what's the next goal? When do we get to meet each other again?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're doing with the funds raised is a little bit of product development, but mostly it's about investing in trying to lower the cost of distribution, which I think we touched on earlier. That quite a lot of the final end user price goes in the overhead of the distribution and all that. And we are looking to use digital tools in particular to try and streamline how we find leads, how we communicate with customers, and how we connect them up with distributors to get their hands on our products. And we've started that already, using some pretty clever stuff on digital marketing to achieve that in these emerging markets.
Right, and I'm sure it'll succeed. Toby Hammond, thank you very much for being with us today.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.